Maria Clendere had exactly 3 rules for surviving corporate America: never back down, never apologize for being smarter than the men in the room, and absolutely never fall for a man in an expensive suit. That third rule had served her particularly well during her 5 years climbing the brutal ladder at Westbrook Financial Group, where expensive suits were as common as overinflated egos. The conference room on the 42nd floor smelled like leather, ambition, and the kind of coffee that cost more per cup than most people spent on lunch. Maria sat near the middle of the long mahogany table, her notebook filled with calculations that would either make her career or end it spectacularly. Around her, 20 senior analysts fidgeted with their tablets. Waiting for the man himself to arrive, Julian Westbrook entered like winter itself had taken human form. At 36, he had inherited his father's empire at 25 and tripled its worth through a combination of ruthless efficiency and an almost supernatural ability to predict market trends. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, his dark hair impeccably styled, and his expression suggested he found the entire world mildly disappointing. "Let's begin," he said without preamble, taking his seat at the head of the table. His assistant, a nervous woman named Patricia, scrambled to pull up the quarterly projections on the massive screen behind him. For 40 minutes, Maria watched her colleagues present their analyses with the enthusiasm of students reciting memorized facts. Julian listened with the interest of someone watching paint dry, occasionally asking questions so pointed they left the presenters stammering. When her turn came, Maria stood with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. "The Morrison merger is a mistake," she said flatly. Skipping the usual pleasantries, the room went so silent she could hear the air conditioning humming. Julian's eyes, a startling shade of gray, locked onto hers with laser focus. "Elaborate," he said, his tone suggesting this better be good. Maria clicked to her first slide. "Morrison Industries looks profitable on paper, but their accounting practices are creative at best and criminal at worst. In 5 years, they'll be drowning in lawsuits. Acquiring them now is like buying a mansion without checking if it's built on a sinkhole." A few nervous laughs rippled around the table. Julian didn't laugh. "Your analysis is based on speculation," he countered coldly. "My analysis is based on 6 months of research that apparently nobody else bothered to do," Maria shot back. "Morrison's CEO has connections with 3 offshore accounts in the Caymans. Their third-quarter numbers don't match their vendor invoices, and their head of compliance just hired a criminal defense attorney." Julian leaned forward slightly, and Maria couldn't tell if he was intrigued or preparing to fire her in front of everyone. "You're suggesting I ignore a $100 million opportunity because of suspicious bank accounts and nervous lawyers. I'm suggesting that $100 million today could cost you $1 billion in 3 years when the fraud investigation goes public," Maria replied, refusing to break eye contact. "But if expensive disasters are your preference, by all means proceed." The sharp intake of breath from her left told Maria she'd just crossed a line. "You didn't talk to Julian Westbrook like that. You certainly didn't imply he made poor decisions. People had been fired for less, escorted out by security while their colleagues pretended not to notice." But instead of exploding, Julian smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who just found interesting prey. "You have 48 hours to prove your theory," he said. "If you're right, you'll lead the team that restructures our acquisition strategy. If you're wrong, you're done." Maria nodded, gathering her materials with hands that definitely weren't shaking. "I'll have the report on your desk tomorrow morning." As she walked toward the door, Julian's voice stopped her. "Miss Clendere, that kind of audacity either makes careers or destroys them. Let's see which one applies to you." The meeting ended, and Maria made it exactly as far as the elevator bank before her legs turned to jelly. She'd just gambled her entire career on insulting a billionaire. Her phone buzzed with a text from her colleague Derek. "Are you insane? He's going to bury you." Possibly, Maria thought, as she rode down to the 35th floor where the analyst pool worked. But she'd been burying herself in safe mediocrity for years, and where had that gotten her? Still drowning in student loans? Still sending money home to her mother every month? Still watching less qualified men get promoted because they played golf with the right people? She spent the next 36 hours living on coffee and spite, building an airtight case against the Morrison merger. Bank records, whistleblower testimonies, forensic accounting that revealed systematic fraud. By the time she compiled everything into a presentation, she had enough evidence to sink Morrison and possibly send their CEO to prison. Maria delivered the report at 6 in the morning, leaving it with Julian's executive assistant before he arrived. Then she went home, took a shower, and prepared for either triumph or unemployment. The call came at noon. Patricia's voice was professionally neutral. "Mr. Westbrook would like to see you in his office. Immediately." Julian's office occupied the entire northeast corner of the 45th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city that looked like a promise or a threat, depending on your perspective. He stood with his back to the door, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the skyline. "Your report was thorough," he said without turning. "Uncomfortably thorough. I've already called off the merger." Relief flooded through Maria, followed quickly by vindication. "So I was right. Spectacularly right." He finally turned to face her, and his expression was unreadable. "Which is why what I'm about to tell you is going to seem insane." Before Maria could respond, Patricia entered carrying a tablet. On the screen was a video already collecting millions of views. Someone had recorded Maria's confrontation with Julian during the meeting and posted it online with the caption, "Financial analyst destroys billionaire boss with facts. Hey, this is unfortunate," Maria said, watching her own face on screen. Flushed with righteous anger, "This is a disaster," Julian corrected. "My investors are questioning my judgment. My board is concerned about volatility, and the press is having a field day painting me as an out-of-touch tyrant." Maria's stomach sank. "I didn't leak this, I know. But the damage is done." Took the tablet from Patricia, dismissing her with a nod. When they were alone, he said, "My PR team has developed a solution. It's unconventional." "How unconventional?" Julian pulled a document from his desk. "We announce our engagement. A carefully crafted story about how our professional rivalry masks a passionate romance. We maintain the fiction for 90 days, long enough to reshape the narrative. Then we part ways amicably, and both our reputations emerge intact." Maria stared at him. "You want me to fake an engagement with you?" "I want us to participate in a mutually beneficial arrangement that salvages both our careers," he clarified. "You'll receive a promotion, a substantial raise, and your choice of projects. After 3 months, you'll have the credibility and visibility to write your own ticket anywhere in finance. And what do you get besides looking less like a corporate villain?" "Humanization," Julian said simply. "A reminder to investors and the public that I'm capable of connection, that I value intelligence and honesty. The woman who challenged me publicly becomes the woman I respect enough to marry." "It's compelling." Maria read through the contract he handed her. It was detailed to the point of absurdity. Public appearances twice weekly, carefully scripted social media posts, a list of acceptable topics for interviews, and clause after clause about maintaining professional boundaries. "This is insane," she said finally. "This is business," Julian countered. "Everything is negotiable except the timeline." "I need an answer by end of business today." Maria thought of her student loans, her mother's mounting medical bills, the glass ceiling she'd been battering against for 5 years. This was either her biggest opportunity or her biggest mistake. "I want creative control over the financial restructuring project," she said. "Done. And when this ends, I want a recommendation letter that opens doors. You'll have it." Maria picked up the pen from his desk. 90 days. Not 1 day longer, agreed. Julian extended his hand, and when Maria shook it, she felt electricity she absolutely refused to acknowledge. This was business. Nothing more. Their first appearance was scheduled for that evening at a children's hospital charity gala. Julian's team worked with terrifying efficiency, sending a stylist to Maria's apartment with 3 designer gowns to choose from. She selected a midnight blue dress that felt like wearing confidence, paired with heels that added 4 inches to her 5'6" frame. Julian picked her up at 7 in a car that cost more than her annual salary. He wore a tuxedo that should have been illegal, looking every inch the billionaire prince from a fairy tale nobody actually believed in. "Ready for this?" he asked as they approached the venue where photographers already clustered like hungry birds. "I've faced down boardrooms full of men trying to steal my ideas," Maria replied, checking her reflection one final time. I can handle some cameras. But when Julian took her hand as they stepped onto the red carpet, when the flashbulbs exploded, and reporters shouted questions, when he looked at her with practiced adoration that felt disturbingly real, Maria realized she might have underestimated this particular challenge. "How did you two meet?" a reporter called out. "She corrected my math," Julian said smoothly, his arm around Maria's waist in a way that looked natural and felt like fire. "I found it devastatingly attractive." Maria forced a laugh that came out more genuine than intended. "He found it infuriating, actually. But apparently he's into that." The crowd laughed, eating up their banter. Inside the gala, Maria played her part perfectly. She laughed at Julian's observations, touched his arm at appropriate moments, and told carefully crafted stories about their fictional courtship to curious socialites. But as the evening wore on, as Julian's hands settled naturally at the small of her back, as their conversation shifted from scripted to spontaneous, Maria felt the first crack in her carefully maintained walls. "You're good at this," Julian murmured. During a quiet moment on the balcony, away from the crowds, "So are you," Maria replied, watching the city lights. "Almost too good. Makes me wonder if any of it is real." Julian's expression flickered with something she couldn't identify. "In 90 days it won't matter." But as Maria looked at him backlit, by the glow of the ballroom she had the unsettling thought that maybe it already did. The morning after the gala, Maria woke to find herself trending on 3 different social media platforms. Photos of her and Julian had been analyzed, dissected, and celebrated by an internet that apparently had nothing better to do than obsess over a billionaire's love life. Her personal favorite headline read, "From boardroom battle to wedding bells, the romance that shocked Wall Street. Only they knew the truth." Her phone buzzed with a message from Julian. "Breakfast meeting at my penthouse. 9 o'clock. Need to coordinate our stories before the press interviews this afternoon?" Maria arrived at Julian's building at precisely 9, carrying her laptop and the kind of determination that had gotten her through graduate school while working 3 jobs. The doorman knew her name now, which felt surreal after just 2 days of this arrangement. The private elevator rose silently to the penthouse, and when the doors opened, Maria stepped into a space that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Julian stood in the kitchen, surprisingly domestic in dark jeans and a white button-down shirt, making coffee with the kind of expensive machine that probably required an engineering degree to operate. Without his armor of tailored suits, he looked younger, more approachable, almost human. "Good morning," he said, handing her a cup that smelled like heaven. "I hope you slept well. The internet certainly didn't." Maria accepted the coffee gratefully. "I've been called everything from a gold digger to a feminist icon in the span of 12 hours. It's been enlightening." "Welcome to life in the public eye." Julian gestured to the dining table, where he'd laid out a schedule that looked more complex than most military operations. "We have 4 events this week: a dinner with my business partners on Tuesday, a museum opening on Thursday, lunch with my mother on Saturday, and a corporate retreat on Sunday where we'll need to maintain the illusion for an entire day." "Here, Mother," Maria repeated, feeling a flutter of genuine anxiety. "That's not in the contract." "My mother is strategic," Julian replied, sitting across from her. "She needs to believe this is real, or she'll see through everything. Catherine Westbrook has a sixth sense for deception." Maria studied the schedule, her analytical mind already cataloging the challenge. "And what exactly does your mother think about you suddenly being engaged to someone she's never met?" Something shifted in Julian's expression, a crack in his usual composure. "She's thrilled. She's been worried about me for years, apparently. Thinks I'm too isolated, too focused on work, too much like my father was before he died." There was a story there, Maria realized, a real one, hiding beneath Julian's carefully maintained surface. How long ago did he pass? 11 years? Julian's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup. Heart attack in his office. He was 53. Everyone said he worked himself to death, and they weren't wrong. I inherited an empire and a warning, but I only paid attention to one of them. Maria felt an unexpected pang of empathy. "Is that why you're so demanding? Trying to prove something?" "Trying not to let it fall apart," Julian corrected. "My father built Westbrook Financial from nothing. Every day I run it is a day I'm honoring his legacy or destroying it. There's no middle ground." "That's an exhausting way to live," Maria observed quietly. Julian met her eyes. and for a moment the corporate titan disappeared entirely. It's the only way I know. They spent the next 2 hours rehearsing their fabricated history. They'd met 6 months ago at an industry conference in Chicago. Julian had been impressed by Maria's presentation on emerging markets, they'd argued. About economic policy over drinks, and somehow the argument had turned into dinner. Then breakfast, then a relationship they'd kept carefully hidden from the office. Why did we hide it? Maria asked, testing the story's logic. Professional concerns, Julian replied smoothly. You didn't want anyone to think you were advancing because of our relationship. I didn't want the board questioning my judgment for dating an employee. It was believable because it was practical. Maria could work with that. The press interviews that afternoon were exhausting. They sat on a cream-colored couch in Julian's living room, while a parade of journalists asked increasingly personal questions. How did he propose? What did her family think? When was the wedding? Maria delivered her lines flawlessly, adding small details that made the fiction feel real. Julian's hand found hers naturally, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her skin that shouldn't have felt as distracting as they did. By the time the last reporter left, Maria's face hurt from smiling. You were perfect, Julian said, finally releasing her hand. The sudden absence of his touch felt oddly disappointing. I've had practice pretending to be something I'm not, Maria replied, more honestly than she intended. You spend enough time in corporate America as a woman, and you get good at performance. Julian studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Is that what you think you're doing? Performing? Isn't that what we both are doing? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Tuesday's dinner with Julian's business partners was held at an exclusive restaurant, where the menu didn't list prices because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Maria wore a burgundy dress that Julian's stylist had selected, paired with diamond earrings on loan from a jewelry company eager to dress the billionaire's fiancé. The partners were exactly what Maria expected. Wealthy men in their 50s and 60s who looked at her like a curiosity, something decorative that Julian had acquired. She smiled through their condescending questions until dessert, when one of them made the mistake of asking if she planned to continue working after the wedding. Of course, Maria replied pleasantly. Why wouldn't I? Well, with Julian's resources, you hardly need to work, the man said, as if he'd offered her a compliment. I don't work because I need to, Maria clarified, her voice still sweet but edged with steel. I work because I'm exceptionally good at what I do. In fact, the financial restructuring project I'm leading is projected to increase company profits by 18% over the next 2 years, so yes, I'll definitely continue working. Julian's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. When she glanced at him, she found him watching her with something that looked almost like pride. The conversation shifted quickly after that. In the car afterward, Julian was quiet for a long time before saying, You didn't have to defend yourself like that. Yes, I did, Maria replied. If I let men like that dismiss me once, they'll do it forever. Besides, I thought the whole point of this arrangement was showing that you value competence. Do value it. Julian turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light of the car. More than you know. Watching you dismantle their assumptions tonight was the most entertaining thing I've seen in months. Something warm bloomed in Maria's chest. Something dangerous that she quickly tried to suppress. Don't get used to it. In 83 days, I'll be dismantling assumptions somewhere else, right? Julian said, looking away. 83 days. Saturday arrived with unexpected nervousness. Meeting Julian's mother felt more daunting than any board presentation Maria had ever given. Catherine Westbrook lived in an estate outside the city. The kind of property that had been in the family for generations and looked like it belonged in a period. Drama. Catherine herself was elegant and sharped, with silver hair styled perfectly and an expression that suggested she saw everything you tried to hide. She embraced Maria warmly, but studied her with the precision of a jeweler evaluating a diamond. So you're the woman who finally caught my son's attention? Catherine said over lunch on the terrace. Julian has mentioned you're quite brilliant with numbers. I do my best, Maria replied modestly. Don't be humble, dear. Julian despises humble. He respects competence. Catherine sipped her wine, her gaze moving between them. Tell me, how did he propose? Maria launched into the story they'd rehearsed. A private dinner. A heartfelt speech about finding someone who challenged him. a ring that had belonged to Julian's grandmother. She delivered it perfectly, hitting every emotional beat. Catherine listened with a small smile and said, "That's a lovely story. Now tell me what really happened." Ere Maria's heart stopped. Beside her, Julian tensed. "Mother," he began, but Catherine raised a hand. "I've known you for 36 years. You don't do heartfelt speeches, and you certainly don't make romantic gestures." She looked at Maria with something that might have been sympathy. "You're a smart woman. Clearly you care about my son, or you wouldn't be here. But whatever arrangement you two have made, don't insult my intelligence by pretending it's a fairy tale." The silence stretched impossibly long. Maria's mind raced through options, but before she could speak, Julian did something unexpected. He took Maria's hand and told his mother the truth. Not all of it. Not the contract or the timeline, but the essence, that they'd started as a solution to a problem and discovered something real in the process. Something neither of them had expected or entirely knew how to handle. Catherine listened without interruption. And when Julian finished, she simply nodded. "That's better. Honesty suits you." She turned to Maria. "My son is brilliant, but emotionally stunted. His father raised him to see everything as a transaction. If you can help him remember that some things have value beyond profit margins, you'll have my blessing, contract or not." They left an hour later, both shaken by the unexpected turn. In the car, Maria finally said, "Why did you tell her?" "Because she was right," Julian replied. "And because I'm tired of lying to everyone, including myself." "What does that mean?" Julian pulled the car over, turning to face her with an intensity that stole her breath. "It means that somewhere between the charity gala and tonight, this stopped being just an arrangement for me. It means when I hold your hand, I'm not thinking about cameras or contracts. It means I'm terrified because I don't know how to do this, but I can't keep pretending I don't want to." Maria's heart hammered against her ribs. "Julian, we can't." "The contract specifically says I don't care about the contract," he interrupted. "I care about you. Your mind, your courage, the way you refuse to be diminished by anyone. I care about how you make me want to be better than the cold bastard everyone thinks I am." Every rational part of Maria's brain screamed warnings. This was exactly the complication they'd agreed to avoid. But sitting in the car with Julian looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, rationality felt very far away. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "Probably the worst I've ever had," Julian agreed. "We have 79 days left on our contract. I know, when it ends. Everything gets complicated. I know that too." Maria took a shaky breath. "So what do we do?" Julian reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with heartbreaking gentleness. "We could keep pretending, or we could see what happens if we stop." Before Maria could overthink it, before fear could stop her, she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't like the carefully orchestrated kisses they'd shared for cameras. This was real, desperate, full of all the feelings they'd been trying to suppress for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to regret this." "Absolutely," Maria agreed. "But not tonight." They drove back to the city in charged silence. Hands intertwined, the future uncertain, but the present suddenly terrifyingly real. The next 3 weeks existed in a strange bubble where Maria felt like she was living 2 lives simultaneously. Publicly, she and Julian maintained their carefully crafted performance as the perfect power couple. Privately, behind closed doors, something genuine and terrifying had taken root between them. They fell into a rhythm that felt dangerously natural. Working late at the office turned into dinner at his penthouse. Business discussions dissolved into conversations about everything else. Childhood memories, fears, dreams they'd abandoned for practicality. Julian told her about the pressure of inheriting his father's legacy at 25, how he'd buried his grief in spreadsheets and acquisition deals. Maria shared stories about growing up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs, about being the first person in her family to attend college, about the constant fear that she didn't deserve the success she'd earned. "You work harder than anyone I know," Julian said one evening as they sat on his terrace watching the city lights. "You've earned everything twice over." "Tell that to the part of my brain that still feels like an imposter," Maria replied. Leaning against his shoulder in a gesture that had become comfortable, Julian pressed a kiss to her temple. Then I'll keep telling you until you believe it. These were the moments that scared Maria most. Not the grand gestures or passionate kisses, but the quiet intimacy that suggested permanence when their contract had an expiration date. The corporate retreat on Sunday was held at a luxury resort 2 hours from the city. Julian's entire executive team would be there, along with key investors and board members. It was the most sustained performance they'd had to maintain. And Maria felt her anxiety building as they drove through the countryside. "You're quiet," Julian observed. One hand on the steering wheel and the other holding hers. "Just thinking about how many people we have to convince today that we're madly in love," Maria said. Trying to keep her tone light, Julian glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Would it help if I told you I'm not convinced we're acting anymore?" Maria's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this conversation for days, both aware that something had shifted but neither willing to name it explicitly. "Julian, we need to talk about what happens when the 90 days end," she said finally. "We're more than halfway through, and we haven't discussed," "I know," he interrupted. "And we will. Just not today. Today, let's just be us." The resort was stunning, all stone and glass nestled among trees that were beginning to show autumn colors. The retreat was structured as a mix of business strategy sessions and team-building activities. The kind of corporate bonding that Maria usually found excruciating. But with Julian beside her, exchanging subtle glances that only she could interpret, even trust falls and problem-solving exercises felt bearable. During lunch, one of the board members, an older woman named Constance Reeves, pulled Maria aside. "I've been with this company for 15 years, she said, without preamble. "I've watched Julian build walls so high I wondered if anyone would ever scale them. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. He's more human now than I've ever seen him." The words stayed with Maria through the afternoon sessions. Through the formal dinner, where Julian gave a speech about innovation and integrity, through the evening reception where they danced under string lights while the executives pretended not to watch them. "What are you thinking about?" Julian murmured as they swayed to music that was trying too hard to be sophisticated. "How strange it is that something fake became the most real thing in my life," Maria admitted. Julian pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching hers. "Maria, I need you to know," his phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Then again, and again. Julian's expression darkened as he pulled it out, and Maria watched his face go pale as he read whatever message had appeared on the screen. "We need to leave," he said tightly. Now, they made hurried excuses and drove back to the city in tense silence. Julian's jaw was clenched, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Maria knew better than to push when he was like this, so she waited until they reached his penthouse before demanding answers. "What happened?" Julian handed her his phone without a word. On the screen was an email from an investigative journalist. Subject line, "Request for comment. The Westbrook engagement contract." Maria's blood turned to ice as she read. The journalist had obtained a copy of their contract. Every clause, every carefully negotiated term. Every damning piece of evidence that their relationship was a calculated business arrangement. The article was scheduled to run in the morning unless they provided a statement. Maria whispered, reading through the contract details that shouldn't have existed anywhere outside Julian's lawyer's office. "I don't know," Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet, "but I'm going to find out." Maria's phone started buzzing, then ringing. Messages flooded in from colleagues, friends, even her mother. The story had already leaked on social media. The internet was doing what it did best, tearing them apart with gleeful efficiency. "Gold digger," one comment read. "She played him for a promotion." "Billionaire buys himself a fake girlfriend because even money can't make him likable," said another. Maria felt physically sick as she scrolled through the vitriol. Every insecurity she'd ever had about not belonging in Julian's world came roaring back with proof that everyone had suspected the truth all along. "I need to call my team," Julian said, already dialing. "We'll issue a statement, threaten legal action, contain this before what?" Maria interrupted, her voice hollow. "Before everyone knows we lied? They already know, Julian. It's over." "It doesn't have to be," he insisted. "We can deny it. Claim the contract is fabricated. That what?" That we're going to lie even more? Maria shook her head, exhaustion crashing over her. I can't do this. I can't stand in front of cameras and pretend anymore. Not when everyone will know I'm lying. Julian crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. Then we tell the truth. Which truth? That we signed a contract to fake an engagement for mutual professional benefit? That'll go over beautifully. I'll be laughed out of every financial firm in the country. The truth that it stopped being fake, Julian said urgently. That we fell in love despite ourselves. That what started as a transaction became real. Maria's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Did it? Or are we just really good at pretending? How do I know any of this is real when it all started as a performance? Because I've never been good at pretending, Julian said, his voice cracking slightly. Because when I hold you, I'm not thinking about contracts or public perception. Because I've spent weeks terrified that when the 90 days ended, you'd walk away and I'd go back to being the cold bastard everyone thinks I am. Julian, I love you, he said simply. I don't know when it happened. Maybe the first night you challenged me in that conference room. Maybe when you defended yourself to my business partners. Maybe it's been building this whole time, and I was too stubborn to see it. But I love you, and that's the only truth that matters to me. Adoris! Carefully maintained composure shattered. Tears spilled down her cheeks as years of walls and defenses crumbled. I love you too, she whispered. That's what makes this so much worse. Because now everyone will think even that is part of the con. They stood in the wreckage of their carefully constructed lie, holding each other as the world. Outside, prepared to crucify them both, the morning brought exactly the media storm they'd expected. The article was damning, detailed, and accompanied by leaked contract documents that left no room for doubt. Maria's phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, former colleagues, even HR from Westbrook Financial, requesting her presence for a disciplinary hearing. Julian's board called an emergency meeting. Several investors issued statements questioning his judgment and integrity. The company's stock dropped 6 points in the first hour of trading. We need to make a statement. Julian's crisis management team insisted during a tense morning meeting at his office. They'd brought in lawyers, PR specialists, and communications experts who all had opinions about damage control. What we need is honesty, Maria said quietly from where she sat slightly apart from the group. She'd barely slept, and exhaustion made her reckless. We've been lying long enough. To respect Miss Clender, honesty is what created this situation, one of the lawyers said condescendingly. No, Maria countered, finding her voice. Dishonesty created this situation. We told one lie to cover a truth we were afraid to face. And now, we're considering telling more lies to cover the first ones. When does it end? Julian had been uncharacteristically silent, but now he stood, commanding immediate attention. Clear the room, he said. Everyone except Maria. The team filed out with varying degrees of reluctance. When the door closed, Julian turned to Maria with an expression she'd never seen before, completely unguarded vulnerability. What if we go public? He said, not with a statement crafted by lawyers. Not with a strategic response designed to minimize damage. What if we just tell the truth, all of it, and let people decide what they believe? Your board will destroy you, Maria warned. Your investors will revolt. Everything you've built means nothing without you, Julian interrupted. These past weeks, I've been more alive than I've been in a decade. You challenge me, frustrate me, make me want to be better than the sum of my father's expectations. If I have to choose between Westbrook Financial and a real life with you, I choose you. Maria's heart seized. Julian, you can't make that choice. Your father's legacy? My father died alone in his office, Julian said harshly. He built an empire and lost everything else in the process. I'm not going to repeat his mistakes. So what do? Julian took her hands, his grip steady despite the chaos surrounding them. We hold a press conference. We admit the truth about the contract. We also tell them that we fell in love anyway. We let them think whatever they want, and we move forward together. Whatever comes next, we face it honestly. Maria searched his face, looking for any hint of performance, any suggestion that this was another strategic move. She found only raw sincerity. This could ruin both of us, she said. Or it could free us, Julian replied. Either way, I'd rather face ruin with you than success built on lies. The press conference was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the lobby of Westbrook Financial. By 1:30, reporters packed the space, cameras ready to capture what they assumed would be either a denial or a dramatic collapse. Maria stood backstage with Julian, wearing a simple navy suit that felt like armor. Her hands were shaking, but when Julian took one of them, she found strength in his grip. "Ready?" he asked. "Absolutely not," Maria admitted. "Let's do it anyway." They walked out together to an explosion of camera flashes. Julian stepped to the podium with Maria beside him, and the room fell silent in anticipation. "Thank you all for coming," Julian began, his voice steady. "I'm going to tell you a story about how two people made a mistake and found something unexpected in the process." He told them everything. The viral video, the PR crisis, the contract designed to rehabilitate his image and advance Maria's career. He was unflinchingly honest about the calculation behind it, the cynicism that had driven them both to agree. "What we didn't account for," Julian continued, "was actually getting to know each other. Maria is the most brilliant, courageous, frustratingly honest person I've ever met. She doesn't care about my money or my name. She challenges everything I think I know and makes me better for it. At some point between the first staged photograph and today, I fell in love with her. That wasn't in the contract. That wasn't planned. That's just what happened." He stepped back, and Maria moved to the microphone, her heart pounding, but her voice clear. "I agreed to this arrangement because I was tired of being overlooked," she said. "I wanted recognition for my work, not just as a woman in finance, but as someone whose ideas had value. I never expected to actually fall for Julian Westbrook. He's stubborn, controlling, and has the emotional availability of a spreadsheet." Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. "He's also thoughtful, principled, and capable of growth when someone calls him on his mistakes. I love him. That's not professional. It's definitely not strategic. It's just true." The questions came rapid fire. Hostile, skeptical, occasionally sympathetic. Maria and Julian answered them as honestly as they could, admitting their mistakes without making excuses, acknowledging the deception while defending the reality of their feelings. Finally, a reporter near the back raised her hand. "What happens now? To your engagement? To your careers? To everything?" Julian looked at Maria, and she saw her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. But she also saw determination. "Now we figure it out," Maria answered. "We deal with the consequences of our choices. We rebuild what we can and let go of what we can't. Together." The aftermath was brutal. Julian's board demanded his resignation, which he provided with surprising calm. Several investors pulled their funding. The company's stock continued to drop. Maria was officially terminated from Westbrook Financial, though given the circumstances, she'd expected nothing less. But other things happened too. 3 competing financial firms offered Maria executive positions before the week ended. Impressed by her intelligence and her integrity in handling the scandal, a venture capital group approached Julian about starting his own fund, free from the corporate structure that had constrained him for years. Catherine Westbrook called to tell them both that she was proud of them for choosing honesty. Even when it hurt, 2 months later, Maria sat in the office of her new boutique consulting firm, helping small businesses develop financial strategies that emphasize sustainability over pure profit. It was different work than she'd done before, more personal, more meaningful. She'd also agreed to serve as a senior advisor for Julian's new venture fund, which focused on ethical investing and corporate transparency. Julian appeared in her doorway holding 2 cups of coffee from the place down the street that didn't charge criminally inflated prices. "How's your afternoon looking?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Busy but manageable," Maria replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I have a meeting with a startup at 3, and I need to review the Johnson proposal before tomorrow." "Cancel them," Julian said with the hint of a smile. "I have a better idea." "Julian Westbrook, are you suggesting I blow off my professional responsibilities?" "I'm suggesting that the woman who taught me about work-life balance should practice what she preaches." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I have 2 tickets to that exhibition you mentioned wanting to see. The one about women in finance history?" Maria felt warmth spread through her chest. 3 months ago, She'd mentioned the exhibition once in passing. That Julian had remembered, had bought tickets, had chosen this over a dozen other demands on his time. Meant everything. "You're getting dangerously good at this relationship thing," she said, standing to kiss him softly. "I have an excellent teacher," Julian replied, pulling her closer. "Though she's still working on teaching me about reasonable working hours." "That's a lifelong project," Maria warned. "You sure you're up for it?" Julian's expression turned serious, though his eyes remained warm. "Maria Klender, I'm up for everything with you. The good days, the difficult ones, the moments we disagree about economic policy at 2 a.m. All of it." That's quite a commitment from a man who 3 months ago thought love was a market inefficiency. "Well, I've learned that some inefficiencies are worth the investment," Julian said, then pulled a small box from his other pocket. Speaking of investments and commitments, Maria's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Not the ostentatious family heirloom from their fake engagement, but something chosen specifically for her. "This time, no contract," Julian said softly. "No clauses or exit strategies or calculated risk assessments. Just me asking if you'll marry me because I love you and I want to spend my life with you, whatever that life looks like." Tears blurred Maria's vision as she nodded, unable to form words past the emotion closing her throat. Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, and this time when they kissed, there were no cameras, no audience, no performance. Just two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way and chosen to build something real from the ruins of a beautiful lie. "So," Julian said eventually, his forehead resting against hers, "should we have another press conference to announce this one?" Maria laughed, the sound bright and free. "Absolutely not. Some things get to be just ours." "Just ours," Julian agreed. "I like the sound of that." Outside Maria's office, the city continued its relentless pace. Somewhere, their story was probably still being discussed, dissected, judged. But inside this small space they'd carved out together, none of that mattered. They'd paid the price for their deception with public humiliation and professional consequences. But they'd also gained something infinitely more valuable: the freedom to be themselves with someone who saw them clearly and loved them. Anyway, Maria looked at the ring on her finger, then at Julian, and felt a certainty she'd never experienced before. They'd started with a contract designed to benefit them both professionally. They'd ended up with something money couldn't buy and contracts couldn't capture: a partnership built on honesty, challenge, growth, and love that was messy and real and entirely theirs. "Ready to close up and go see that exhibition?" Julian asked. "With you?" "Always," Maria replied. Gathering her things, they walked out together into the late afternoon sunlight, hands intertwined, ready to face whatever came next. Not as a billionaire and his employee, not as a fake engagement designed to manipulate public perception, but as two people who'd found their way to each other through chaos and chosen to stay. And that, Maria thought, as Julian held the door open for her with a smile that was entirely genuine, was the best contract either of them had ever signed. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.